Hello and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly and hopefully lively look at all matters property designed to be of interest to people with an interest in property. And Property Matters is sponsored by Fairview International and also by Town and Country Property Auctions London Limited. From conveyancing to cladding, property's never far from the news, as we know, and we welcome your comments on all the matters that we're discussing this week. As always, in the comments below the video, of course, they will come up on the screen in front of us and we can bring you into the conversation, or of course, via email, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. And joining us to discuss all matters property is our property expert, our resident property expert, of course, it is Joe Joshi. Joe, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Paul. It's been an interesting week. I've got my jab, so that's
Have
a
you?
good thing. Start. Yeah, I know a man who knows a man. No, I'm only joking.
It was a legal one, was it? It wasn't one of those ones you had to pay for.
I can't tell you that on air.
Well, we can have you in the studio then very soon. One hopes.
Yeah. Well, I just sort of, we can have that touchy, lovey feeling sort of back again soon. The PM is about to tell the people that they can at least start to have some family around. So that, I'm sure, is all exciting news. But it's all relevant. It's relevant to us in our property world because people make a lot of decisions based on what is actually happening in their life today.
And we will be discussing those very points in one of our questions very shortly. So let's hurtle headlong into the news, as always, Joe, as we've got lots to discuss this week. And I love the way that the government seems to be dripping these little hints into the marketplace for us. And there is the news that a 6-week extension is now rumoured to be considered by Chancellor Rishi Sunak. The Telegraph reported this week. And obviously the holiday finishes on the 31st of March, and that would take us to the middle of May if we had another 6 weeks. And that reputedly would help 160,000 people, Joe.
Yes, I mean, this is an ongoing little subject of ours, I think, and of course very important when it's all about saving money, and the amount of money that it actually reflects is quite a lot depending on the house price that you're going to be purchasing. I've always felt that they would probably have to do something, and whether it's a time limit on the type of sales that are in or an extension. I doubt very much a U-turn. It would be quite nice for them to basically extend it for the balance of the year, because once again, the year has been taken away by the pandemic. And I think it could be only fair, but 6 weeks is, I suppose, better than a poke in the eye, as they say, for the time being. But I think, the market has been favourable. It's the construction and building and selling of property that has kept the coffers coming in for the government whilst they've been spending out on the other side. So I think it's a very crucial point that they've got to do. But it's good to know that the potential talk of 6 weeks, but I'm hoping that he's a little bit better than 6 weeks. And maybe as the kids start to go back to school, the market starts to take shape. I think we can get it till the end of May. It would be good, because then we're going to fall into the summer market, and the summer market tends to drop anyway. So I think if you could take it up to the time of the summer school breaks, that gets everybody sorted, and then they can start to move into their new homes over the summer break when the kids are not back at school. And then start the new term with some sort of normality back in September. But these are all ideal on the wish list, as they say, Paul. But let's see what our man Rishi turns up and says.
Well, we're 10 days away from the budget announcement on March 3rd. It's 10 days from today. And I guess we'll see what happens. But there are those people, mostly solicitors and people involved in the transactional side of the business, that are saying, well, this doesn't help anybody giving another 6 weeks, because all that's going to do is put more people in at the top end who are going to be disappointed at the other end. So people that were maybe looking at agreeing a sale towards the end of February, early March, would have no chance of getting it through right now to the 31st of March, but now they've got a chance again. So perhaps they'll chance their arm. Surely what he should be saying is that, all those that came into the system from, say, the 1st of February, you'll have as long as it takes, or 6 weeks extra to get yours done. But no one else new into the system. Otherwise, this could just go on forever, surely.
The problem is, how do you define the system, and who defines it? Who's the one that's going to say it? I mean, there'll be from an agent's point of view, I can tell you that we would want to pack it in as much as we can. So, I'm not sure how he could actually police that situation, because there's always going to be someone who says my sale was in at a certain time, and we didn't get the opportunity. I just think that, I think I agree with you by saying that there comes a time when you've got to cut it off. And I personally have felt that because of the pandemic and the fact that the vaccine rollout is now giving some sense of comfort, and people are beginning to feel positive, I think you should just take it to the summer break, and let them just get on with it, and keep the market flowing, because naturally every summer, every year, that's the time. And I'm pretty certain that if we get the clarification from them about the lockdowns that are being loosened up, and people being able to fly out, airlines and hotels are going to get very busy all of a sudden, which is a welcome thing for them, because they've suffered quite a lot. So I think, if we can get him to do it, or he sees sense in logic, then he would take it up to that and say that's the cutoff point, and that's the end of. There's no discussion. Get what you can get in that period, and after that, enjoy your summer holidays, and that will give them a direction. But that's just wishful thinking at the moment, Paul. That's all we can see is see what the man's got to say.
But I guess, of course, I guess there is the fact that people will have had to have committed funds into that transactional process at the beginning in the hope that they're going to complete. So if he didn't extend it, there are going to be, and they're saying up to 160,000 people who will lose money, I presume.
Well, yeah, people have spent money on searches, legal fees, surveys, valuations, all sorts of things that is they're not going to be very happy about. That's what I'm saying, that I think you should extend it to a reasonable time and let that run happen. It's also good for the country, don't get me wrong. It's also good for the government. At the end of the day, they may not be getting the stamp duty cutoff, but there are deals that are happening where it's not all about stamp duty. Stamp duty is a part of the deal. There are other transactions. They get some of that stamp duty. Maybe they'll save some of the money, but they won't save all of the money. So I'm not sure that it's actually got any negativity if he actually continues it for a bit longer. And I think that the June, July, whenever the kids break up in July, I think that's the time to put the date on it and say, right, when that summer break happens, so does a stamp duty break. So after that, you're on your own completely. Otherwise, it will continue. It's going to be a bit like the pandemic. Every week we're going to get an update of whether we are in or whether we are not out. And I think people just get a bit fed up with it. Really, they just want to know, and that's where we are now. We all just want to just know, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And remind us why we shouldn't just ban it altogether, abolish it.
Well, I think, the reason why it cannot be abolished, it's a tremendous amount of income for the government. And equally, it is part of our infrastructure. There isn't really another route. I know people have talked about maybe making your council tax, as part of this. There's always, and then the council tax will have to be paid by the tenant if somebody's bought it. There's always going to be an argument. It is what it is. It's been with us forever. It's going to stay there. It brings a lot of income to them. And of course, they've been spending out heavily. So, it's got to come from somewhere. And considering the rest of the market hasn't been doing particularly well, shops have been closed, they've got to continue to do this. I can't see that they're going to abolish it. And I can't see that they're going to reduce it. But what I can see is that they'll just give us the time to do this. But not only because it's good for us as a consumer and agent, it's equally good for the government. to make sure that they don't add another piece into their basket of troubles. Because all of a sudden, if the housing market isn't moving, the people aren't investing, there are other businesses, your DIY business, your painters, decorators, builders, developers, all of those start to suffer. So it's a knock-on chain effect. And I think it's important that they actually sustain it till probably about the summer break.
Okay, good. New property taxes could threaten the supply of affordable housing. So what's this all about? Well, I'm delighted to say, Joe, that Ash Verma, who was here last week, who we know has had a career in public life and is a private investor in property himself, he called it absolutely right, because this week Robert Jenrick has said that the big developers such as Taylor Wimpey, Barratt and Barclay, these kind of big home builders, are all going to have to pay 2 new taxes from 2022. No details were given this week when they were announced, by the way, but introduce a levy and a tax on developers to contribute to righting the wrongs of the past, said Mr. Jenrick. So I remember very distinctly last week, Joe, that Ash sat down and said it's the time for everybody responsible to get round the table. That's the leaseholders, the developers, the freeholders and the government. And that's essentially what they're saying here, is that everyone's got to take a piece of this. And now these big builders are going to have to pay for it.
Yes, and we covered that quite fully, really, with Ash. But equally, what I had said is that the bottom line lies with the insurers on this, Paul. They get their money from builders, from individual persons that take a mortgage, from lenders. I mean, they just rake it in left, right, and centre, as far as insurance are concerned. Now, yes, Robert is saying that he's going to put this tax on, or potential tax on, these developers, and guess where that tax is going to be? It's going to be passed down in the value of the prices. And again, we're going to pay for it. So whichever route you take, you can skin this cat as many different ways as you go. But the bottom line is going to be that the customer is going to still end up paying for it. And then on one side, they want to take the stamp duty scenario away. On the other side, they want to add a tax to these builders, and those builders are only going to put that in the value of their property. And guess where it's going to come back from? So it's round and round and round we go. But I personally believe that it should be the insurance companies that have actually, taken loads and loads of money from laymen, ordinary people, including the developers and builders, who are told they have to pay for that insurance, and the insurance company have to provide that cover when they build that new house. That's why we do it. We take insurance out for all of those purposes, whether it's our cars or our home or whatever we tend to do it. We do it because that's the idea. And we do that with our buildings, and it's down to the insurance company. And I take on board Ash's view that everybody should, sit around the table. But I think the government should actually be putting a hell of a lot of pressure on the insurance company and saying, you've had the money, every month you've collected this, now pay for it. Why are the developers being punished? Now, if the developers are being punished, well, I can tell you they're only going to punish the customer, and that means we're back to square one. So I think it's important. And this cladding thing, of course, he's devoted, £5 billion towards the cladding. He needs to get the money from somewhere. So he thinks by taxing the developer, he's actually going to get that money back. Well, not really. The developer's only going to pass the buck.
That was my next question. Surely that's going to be passed straight on to the customer. It's interesting, actually, this week, and this confirms what you're saying, really, is that Which did a survey, and they've seen that the insurance premiums, the maximum they've seen is an increase of 1,000%. I mean, it's just untenable, isn't it, really, in terms of affordability for any leaseholder or anyone in that matter, for that matter.
Well, that becomes almost mandatory, doesn't it, now? So, if you can't do this and you can't do that, if you haven't got insurance for this, it's a continuation of things happening. And the system is now such that it's policed in such a way that everyone and anyone knows that you haven't got the insurance. And if you haven't got the insurance on something, then you're going to get penalised. And you got to get a penalty for not having the insurance in the first place. So it's a continuing circle that insurance has become the bane. And yes, they are putting the prices up because obviously the claims are going up. And, the claims are going to go up even more as time goes on, because there's loads and loads of claims that are going to come out of insurance. I mean, okay, God rest the souls of those people that we have lost through the pandemic. But, there's a whole bunch of rafter of things that are going to probably end up on the insurance table. We haven't even started that part of it's a bit like your PPI or whatever they called it. That somebody somewhere is going to turn around and say, by the way, the hospitals or the trust or somebody who didn't take care of your loved one, you're entitled to insurance. Is one of those things that it's just going to be an ongoing saga. And I think I don't have an issue with insurance people on that basis, because I think they collect more often than they pay out. And this is their time to pay out. They're just hiding. They're sitting in the corner hoping that they don't get spotted. But the reality is they need to come to the front and be upfront about it, and they might get a better deal. Otherwise, they're going to get a raw deal. And the problem is, whatever raw deal they get, we're going to get passed on to, and we're going to have to pay for it.
Be interesting actually to get an insurance specialist on the program and get the other side of that coin.
I'd love to get that, but I tell you, they're hiding in the corner. They don't want to come down. They don't want to. They're not.
After the comments you just made there, I'm not surprised.
They're not. They're not going to get ridiculed by me, are they?
And that leads us nicely into that story, because this is where that research was revealed this week. Property Industry Eye telling us about this here. This is a bit of opinion here, which is quite interesting, because this gives another side. You remember, Joe, we talked about the leasehold reforms. We discovered that leasehold is 1,000-year-old system in this country, and we were going to move over to a common hold system, which is more popular in Europe. And here's the other side of that argument, which I hadn't actually appreciated, and I think it's worth debating, which is why we put it in the show today. But the idea is that it makes it simpler and cheaper for leaseholders to run their properties the way they want. But of course, there is another argument to that. What we're doing, says Jamie Truscott here, that we're putting all the responsibility for the building into the hands of inexperienced leaseholders who are not professional freeholders who negotiate with building insurance companies on a regular basis, often for big blocks, and can get large discounts for their insurance holders. And we're giving all that responsibility to people who don't know the market right in the middle of a national cladding crisis. It does seem rather chaotic, and all that will happen from that is they won't be able to negotiate bulk discounts. They won't necessarily get the best insurance because they don't know how the technicals of a building insurance works, which of course professional freeholders do. And furthermore, they might actually end up in dispute with their neighbours within the block because they can't agree how the common areas are going to be policed, managed or maintained. So it is an interesting point, isn't it? And that's the other side of the argument. Joe, what's your view?
Yeah, I think these things are manageable in smaller quantities. So let's say if there's a block of 10 or a block of 8 or so forth, and you can get 8 or 10 people around the table and probably have that discussion. The argument fails when you have a massive block of 200 properties there, and half of those are never owned by the people that are in there. They're either tenants or renters, and they don't really care. And the ones that are investing, they're the ones that look at it. So that's where it really falls. I mean, you couldn't have somebody that really isn't responsible to be part of a negotiation. You're absolutely right in terms of the negotiation aspect of it, because obviously united you stand and divided you fall. And if you have 100 people all having a different opinion, you're never going to get anywhere on it. So, there will be companies set up, whether it's through your lawyers or through some management blocks that deal with such things. But at the same time, I do tend to agree going forward that where possible, the longer leases are important, or a virtual freehold or a share of the freehold is a much better way to go forward for developers to build and maybe 10, 12, flats, 20 even, doesn't matter, as long as, there's some sort of share. And then they tend to set up a management company or management team between them, and that deals with this issue of the common areas. And I understand that common areas can be quite a challenge, especially when you've got a block and you've got, I don't know, let's say you've got 12 flats in there and 10 of them are rented and 2 people are living in there. It's a nightmare for the guy who lives in there because the tenants don't tend to care. So all of a sudden, the central area is either full of bicycles or rubbish, or somebody hasn't taken care of it. And all of those things make a huge difference to the value of the property and how somebody lives there. So managing blocks and management of some sort is definitely going to be always there. It's just about how that is policed and dealt with. And I think, as I said, smaller blocks definitely should be considered where, why would somebody want to take a hassle on for 10 or 12? I can understand if I was a manager for a block of 200, then there's an income for me to do that, and it's worth the headache. But it's not worth the headache when you're doing smaller ones because you're never going to get them together. So I think there's two sides of the story there, and some of it has some benefits, and of course the other one doesn't have any.
Do you think there's an element of perhaps sour grapes that missed revenue because the professional freeholders are going to lose business over this?
Always, but they're going to find another route. I mean, when we've been selling property for as many years as I have, some of the deals are normally scuppered by the fact that there's some management company who hasn't got their facts together, and all of a sudden we can't get the information, or every time you want some information, they make a charge for it. It's colossal. And people don't take it on board. I'm probably just as much as at fault of that as anybody else is. You got these companies, they send you bills for no reason whatsoever, and you think, well, why am I doing this? Why? You can't bother. It's not until you come to sell it you think, oh shit, I should have done that. And then I haven't done it. Now I've got to ask them again. They say, oh well, you've got to pay another fee for us to give it to you. So it's money for old ropes for somebody who does do it, but it is partly sour grapes, and it is partly that the systems are changing and people are more hands-on in what they're doing.
People are always very resistant to change, Joe, of course, as we know. Interesting to look at another analysis of 2020. We usually pass at this stage in the mid-February. I would have thought the analysis of the previous year, but and normally I would sort of pass over on something like this. But I thought it was quite interesting just to have a look at what's being reported here by Mark Da Silva. Basically, we're talking about. We did discuss, as you know, Joe, the fact that there was a year of two halves last year, whereby we had pre-stamp duty holiday and post-stamp duty holiday. Nothing happened in the first 6 months, broadly speaking, of 2020, and then everything happened in the last 6 months. And that obviously rescued the year to some extent, but it's interesting to see that even after all that great activity in the second half of last year, we were still 38% down on sales year on year, Joe. So sales in 2019 were 277 billion and just 177 billion in 2020. So there was an effect there, clearly.
Yes, that was natural, isn't it? I mean, we were all thrown into this whole whirlwind of problems, businesses closing, people at home, members of family dying. It was just carnage of a level that I don't think we've all ever experienced at all. And in my mind, it was something like a silent world war going on. So in view of that, I think one good thing that the government did with the stamp duty business was that they kept the drive of the property market, and it kept people's sanity and emotions well for moving or choosing and designing, and the whole mindset was very, very different. And I think in view of that, I think that there was a good number of sales. It's what's kept the market of interest. It's what's kept our program of interest, and it's kept me equally interested. And I've always said that there's only one real sound, solid form of investment that anybody will ever make, whether it's a home, that they have because they're going to live in it, or an investment for a house to rent in. You can touch it, see it, feel it. You can put your key in the door and you can walk inside and go, this is mine. Okay, 95% or 90% of it might belong to the mortgage company, but it's yours. Anything else that we deal with is just air. You're not going to see it. You might see the stocks and shares, and God helps those people who had stocks and shares when the markets of some of the major banks and building societies and companies have had a tumble last year because of the uncertainty that was going in people's private lives. So I think under the circumstances, I think the housing market has done well, even though it might be numbers wise lesser than the year before. But add to the pandemic the lesser of the stamp duty, would we have a housing market in 2020? That would have been a question, wouldn't it? I mean, I remember 2007, 2008, when the financial crisis happened. In 2008, there was hardly a house sold. And from 2007 to 2014, there was a drought in the housing market. And obviously they've learned from that and realized that they needed to keep that thing churning over. And that's why we're still doing business in the property and in the development industry. People are still building, and we're way behind targets on the built properties. So I think from a numbers point of view, and I, of course, I have to thank you for bringing your charts, graphs, and
we've got a table this week, Joe.
Tables, and all sorts of stuff that you like to do. But the answer to your question, my friend, is that as far as I'm concerned, it's been good news for the housing market, irrespective of numbers.
Yeah, and looking at where that activity is happening, what's interesting in this little graph or table on the page here at the moment is that some 20 billion of those sales, so just over 10% of those sales, have come from London alone. So despite the fact that we're led to believe that people are leaving London, London is still very, very buoyant, shall we say. City of Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, Wandsworth, Camden, Bromley, Barnet, Lambeth, Richmond upon Thames, Hammersmith, Fulham, they're all in that top list there. What's interesting, though, as well, Joe, is to see that Cornwall and also the Midlands and the North, so you've got Birmingham and Leeds in there as well, for example, they're all seeing good growth and strong growth. So it's interesting that people are looking on a more regional level, perhaps.
I think part of the regional level became a challenge in the pandemic. I mean, it's always been there, and all the areas that you've mentioned are areas that are commutable now, achievable, and good value for money is there. Lifestyle is much better. So when you think of places like Cornwall, it's a healthier lifestyle, albeit it's alien. It's the other side of the world. When you think it takes 4 hours from London to Cornwall to get there, you could actually get to Spain in the same time and sit on the sun. So sit in the sun. So there are different views and different challenges that one would look at. But London will never ever lose its appeal. We've discussed this, and I'll continue to say it. As soon as this airline business is back in the business, you will see more and more foreign investors coming back straight into London, looking to buy and invest in our great city and one of the greatest cities in the world, and that will continue to happen. At the moment, they're having a bit of a correction because there hasn't been the supply is there, the demand has been there as well. It's just that they can't get to it because of the pandemic. But as soon as the airlines and people start to say, okay, well, I can fly over, I'm going to be over in June, July, when summer months happen elsewhere, London is packed. And those people, those investors will come over. They will start looking at it, and London will always do that. The home counties, the places that we've talked about, and all places out as far as Birmingham and Devon are there because the current situation has now just made it a little bit, it brought it to the forefront, I would say, in thinking, do I need to work in the centre of London? Do I need to work in the centre of my town? Can I move to some of the suburbs and move to the country and have a better way of life? Have the things that I want in my home that I can't have in a flat or in a central location. And those are some of the things that we will cover a bit later on. But those are all important issues that now are making people think and rethink about their own strategy, and they can, and the system has allowed that to happen now.
If I'm looking to buy my first property or even move to a new area, maybe a second property purchase, would I follow a chart like that? So seeing that, for example, Bromley is a desirable place, a lot of sales happen in Bromley. So would I look to go to Bromley where I'm perhaps going to be paying top of the market, or would I be better off going to somewhere that isn't on that list but potentially might grow in the future? I mean, obviously, if I'm going somewhere not so popular, I'm probably going to get better value. So, what would you advise to someone? Would you go and pay perhaps top of the market like that, or would you go and find your own little place that's got potential?
I think the first run of the ladder is always about what you can afford and what works for you work-wise, and that has changed a lot. When I started in this business back in the 80s, there were a lot of different things. The desire and the design was very different to what we now talk about. There were things like, for first-time buyers, it's always about connectivity, life. Where can they? Where's the pub, the pizza place, and can I get the beer delivered and all that kind of stuff? It's all about the commitment. Whereas from a family point of view, it may have been schooling, it may have been getting to work into London, right train station, right connectivity, communication, good motorway links, all of those things would have mattered. As we now go through the pandemic side of it, things like, and I'll harp on about it, things like internet has now become an issue. People want to know that they can actually get a decent internet connection because they're going to be working from home. They're going to be doing Zoom calls and that sort of stuff. So all things will differ as time has gone on. What are the areas? Number one is about your pocket, whether you can afford it and whether your mortgage goes into it. I wouldn't say take on more than that is necessary. Certainly get on the first run of the ladder. The good thing about property and property prices and the investment of property in the United Kingdom is always been that it hasn't had a reverse gear. It might just be neutral for a while, but sooner or later it will go forward. It's just about whether it fits your circumstances. When you talk about the areas that you've talked about, and then there are others like, I don't know, some areas like Middlesbrough or Sunderland in the north, where for less than £120,000, which actually falls below the current minimum threshold of stamp duty, which is 125,000, you can go and buy something. But the question is, when the high speed 2 comes in operation, those areas, just as Crossrail has done and some of the others, will get affected. So the answer to the question is, look at what's right for you. Look at the communication, the commuter, whether the traveling is good. I think I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with somebody who said that they moved to Leicester. And the reason why they moved to Leicester, it actually took them an hour and 20 minutes on the train straight into London. But when they lived in London, it used to take them longer to get into London, and the house prices were astronomical. So, and it was an interesting, analogy that they've actually taken the view that it was easier to just live in Leicester and travel into town, because they only needed to do it 2 or 3 times a week. The rest of the time they could work from home. So the whole ethos of moving home, the whole way we think has changed, Paul, and it's going to change even more as time goes on. And so my suggestion to anyone who's looking, first-time buyers or not, is about getting on to the first run. And if it means you've got to go out further to come back in, if that's what you need to do, then do that. But, once you step on it, once you have that bug of home ownership, trust me, it will change your views and change your life. It's like anything. When you pay for something out of your own pocket, you tend to value it just a little bit more and a bit better. Funny enough, you'd even wash the dishes in the kitchen sink. I mean, it's just like having kids at home. They'll just leave everything everywhere, won't they? Because it doesn't matter. But the minute they have their own investment, they'll tell you, can you do such and such? And you think, hang on a minute, I told you that all your life, and now I'm here, you're telling me this. I remember a little story about my dad, and he sort of he said, we put a new carpet in, and a member of my family said, "Dad, do you mind taking your shoes off?" And he just picked up his shoe and he chased him around the house. And he says, "All your life, you walked on my carpet and never took your shoes off. And today you paid for a bit of carpet. Now you're telling me I've got to take my shoes off." So the value changes. And until somebody puts their hand in their pocket and realizes that they've actually paid for it, all of a sudden their whole attitude changes. So get on the run of the ladder and change the attitude is my answer.
Nice. So let's just have a quick look at an issue that we've not covered before, but I know is something that a lot of agents in particular have real views on, and that is online reviews. And probably estate agents suffer, should we say, with these more than anyone else. Although this example, whilst relevant to the estate agency, is actually with a law firm. But basically, the long and short of this story is that a disgruntled man left a negative review about a legal firm on Trustpilot, referring to their services as a total waste of money. And the long and short of it is they took him to court and they won a case for libel damages to the amount of £25,000. So that's really interesting because obviously a lot of agents, suffer from reviews or have a mixed opinion about them, Joe. What's interesting here, though, is that this is the first instance where there has been a case that's been successfully prosecuted. Even more interesting that Trustpilot at no stage was actually involved in any of this. So the law firm didn't go to Trustpilot, which is their claim that they wish they had done, because they would have sorted it. However, they've chosen to make a stand, and effectively it's left Trustpilot in a really vulnerable position, because if you're able to sue for anything people put online, and the argument would obviously say that you should be able to do that if that's not true. But the companies like Trustpilot have allowed us to think that they are the arbiters of what's right and what's wrong. And very often people have fallen foul of that discussion they've had about whether it's a genuine thing or not. So the point here, I guess, is that Trustpilot have been put in a very vulnerable position because they are no longer seen to be part of the argument. And that spells a really interesting change potentially for the estate agency industry, I would have thought.
Paul, the problem is that the world has changed to a point where you can just, your fingers do all the talking. So when you get a disgruntled or unhappy person, it's very easy for them to just go online and air their view. It's almost, trigger happy anger. And sometimes you can't even take it back. You might say to yourself, you know what, I should have done that, or I should have said that, really didn't. But the problem is that once it goes on, it just never goes off. With that in mind, it creates problems. So 9 times out of 10, you don't want a review. You don't want somebody to do it. But the system is such that it's there available now for people to make it. Any of these vehicles like Trustpilot and so forth, they're great to put these things up and put it out to people, but they're absolutely lousy when you actually turn around and say to them, actually, that wasn't true. So maybe part of the reason why they weren't involved in it is because actually nobody trusts the Trustpilot. Forget about it calling itself Trustpilot, because they are not fair in itself. Their attitude has always been that if it's on there, it's not their problem. They just provide the template and the vehicle for someone to voice and air their opinion, and that's what somebody's done. So whilst at the moment they might think, oh, they should have been part of that discussion, I can tell you that they're not particularly helpful people, and it's probably better not to be part of that discussion because they're not going to do anything. So that's probably why the lawyers have got involved and got the result that they actually did get for someone who's actually put some sort of slanderous messages and so forth. And in a way, that's a good thing, because it means that when people are doing these things, they maybe need to take stock and stop and think about what they're about to say about somebody, because sooner or later it might come and bite them on the bottom. But as it has done in this particular case. Reviews are temptingly important because you want people to say good things, nice things about you. And it works one way when it's nice things, but it's equally lousy when it's bad things. And we know that the best news that ever sells is bad news, not the good news. And it's very rarely that actually happens. So I think reviews are generally important because they're good morale boosters. They're good for the system, good for the soul. But equally, somebody could do you a lot of damage just on that, and it's just impossible to get someone to say, well, that wasn't true, and then that's time and money, isn't it?
Yeah, but you could argue, Joe. I mean, their argument back to you would be, actually, what we've done is we've made potential rogue agents or people that are likely to sail close to the wind to think twice about their behaviour because they don't want a review. So you could argue there's been some element of policing of behaviour with the fear of these negative reviews.
I don't disagree with the policing and the fact that these situations exist, Paul. And of course, there are people that will probably have such reviews on them. What I'm trying to say to you is that there are genuinely people that shouldn't have those reviews, and there's two sides to every story. Unfortunately, you only get one version on here. It's the customer's version, and then you could spend the rest of your time, money, and energy trying to fight that. And that's time and money. And if you put value on time and money against what it is, you almost sort of have to sort of brush it over and say, no. In this particular case that you're bringing to our discussion is that someone went, no, I'm not accepting this. This is not right. But 99.9% of the people just can't be bothered. And it doesn't matter whether they're getting a good review or a bad review. It's just that somebody's gone off and mouthed off or done been trigger happy of their opinion. The problem is no one's actually stopped and asked them why they did that. And if you actually genuinely ask them, the 99.9% of chances, they'll probably say, I was so angry and annoyed at the time I did it, but actually maybe I shouldn't have. And Trustpilot aren't going to pick up the phone and say, do you think this is a fair review, Mr. Smith or whatever, of this person? No, they don't care. That's what makes their business work. So, my view is that basically it's not always honest and honourable, but no choice. It is what the system is. It allows people to say what they want to say, and they're going to continue to say it on those bases.
We should watch this one with close interest. But I'm delighted to say you had a good one this week.
Yeah.
It's a shameless plug.
Yeah.
Thank you to Ian Simpson for a very nice review of Joe's auction property business. And so if you want to read that in detail, go on to Google of the Google page for Town and Country Property Auctions. Don't forget, of course, any comments that you have on the show. We'd love you to get in touch with us. You can do that just below the video that you're watching right now. Or, of course, you can get in touch with us, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. And, Joe, we've got a subject to discuss in detail this week, which I know is one of your key topics. So fire away.
So yeah, Paul, I've always tried to give an opinion based on value, based on what I think makes the changes and makes people understand what they've actually got. So I've often said, and those that have probably been in tune with us before will know that I've always talked about things like the exterior, the outside of the house, because I think that when you're looking to, whether you're looking to sell it or whether you're looking to rent it, or whether, whatever you're going to do with the money that you've spent and put that investment into something, people tend to forget what the outside looks like and what the neighbors' properties look like. And all of those points have a relevance. And the reason why it has a relevance is it actually matters to the value of the property. So you bought something for 150, 300, 400, £1 million, whatever it might be. And you drive through and you put your key through the door and everything's fantastic, but you've not looked at the surroundings, you've not looked at the rubbish, for argument's sake, people chuck out their car as they go along because they've had a takeout, and they can't be bothered to take it home or put it in a bin. They'll just chuck it out and nobody will go and pick it up. And the streets look rubbish. It ends up outside your house. It makes you look as if you don't care about it or your neighbours don't care. So I've often said that part of this has got nothing to do with government. every time somebody says this, oh, it's the council, they don't do it, it's such and such, they don't do it. It's not. It's your own responsibility to make sure that your own property, your own front door, your outside looks good. And it's also your responsibility to tee up with your neighbors and make it look good. Because if your street looks nice, anyone that wants to come to buy it in the future is going to say, right, I want to live here. This is a nice road. I've driven down here, and the footpath is clean. There's no rubbish lying on the floor. Somebody has cut the grass. They've pruned the roses, and it's not full of junk cars and rubbish outside, which determine the value of your home. And at the end of the day, that is a very, very key thing for everybody that listens and watches to do this. It makes your home worth less because your area is not right. So my subject today really is that once you put the key through the door, that's the next area that is going to be. So you've got them to the door, you've got them to look at your house, whether they've done it through Rightmove or gone to the local agent, and they've actually got the front door. And now the part is that you open the front door, and the front door opens into sometimes a porch, and it's just because of space. It's not, and somebody has a big reception room, reception landing area, reception hall, etc. And some people don't. And then what happens is, within about a few seconds of them stepping inside, a potential buyer has already made a decision in their mind that it's too small. And why is that? Well, the reason for it is that it's cluttered. You've got too many things in there, and they're convenient for you, and it's okay while you're living there. But if you ever decide that you want to sell, or you are having guests to your property, or someone's going to visit to you, which obviously hasn't happened this last 18 months because of the pandemic, but it will return at some stage. Try and minimize the amount of clutter that there is in the entrance porch or the lobby and so forth, and try and shift that elsewhere, just so that door can open and you can step back and somebody can come in. Because that moment, it's a bit like wearing the jacket or the coat in a store. When you put it on, it just feels comfortable, feels right. It feels that, fits nice. And that's about walking through your front door. If you can't wear it, if it doesn't feel right, you've already made a decision it's too small. And that's what happens with the house. It just becomes too small. And doesn't matter how big the rooms are afterwards, you still can't get it out of your head. As you walk through the door, you sort of all shuffled around trying to get, because there were shoes, there were coats on the back of the door, there was umbrellas, there was, the dog's stuff, whatever you want to call it. It's just, so my point was that really take a stock, take some time out and think about how the hallway looks, and how you can declutter that area. Now, sometimes back, and you all probably remember this, everybody started knocking out walls left, right, and centre, because open plan was all the rage. That was what everybody wanted to do. And so we took the hammer and knocked the arches out, and knocked the middle wall out, and put the RSJ out, and knocked the fireplace. It was a massive, great lounge diner, open plan kitchen, breakfast. This was all the rage as time goes on. But what has happened since the pandemic is actually made a lot of people at homes. All of a sudden, they need those rooms back.
Yeah, need their privacy.
Need the privacy. You need somewhere to go and put your computer on and do your study. Kids need an area what they want to do, and the utility room has now become a desirable aspect of any new purchase. And people are asking the question, that does it have a utility room? And you ask yourself why? Well, the reason is that all of a sudden, having the walks, taking the dog out for a walk, having all those bits, the utility room has become quite an important feature. You're almost now beginning to say, well, I'll put this kitchen, but I must have an area for utility room, which at some time was taken out completely. People just took it out. The fridge, freezer, the tumble dryer, and the washing machine was all part of the kitchen. Now, as time goes on, they're saying, let's bring the utility room back. So you've got to rethink the whole strategy of what your home's got to look like and what is going to sell. And so each week, each time, I try and give my view, my experience of a lot of years of what people are asking, the type of questions people are asking. So what I share with you is not something I've just sort of conjured up myself and thought, oh well, that's something to talk about. This is what the conversations are happening when we have the conversation with potential buyers who want to buy in an area, and they say, oh, will it have this? I remember when I started starting out back in the day, my marketing guru at the time said to me, he said, well, if they're looking for a garage, then sell them the garage and give them the house for free, because really what they want is a garage. And so now it's almost like they want a utility room, so let's tell them the utility room and give them the house for free, because that's ultimately where it is. But the whole marketing strategy of home has changed because our way of life has begun to change. And so rethink that. I mean, people will come to you with an idea and say, let's knock this out. Think again. Think about the practicality of it. So something you knock out, you might end up putting back in, primarily because you need it. I know it kind of shrinks the space and you think, oh, take it out and I could do it. But the practicality of it is, if you've got 2 or 3 kids at home, all in the 2 rooms, which is the big lounge diner and the big kitchen breakfast room, you're just going to have arguments. And that is what's now come to the forefront, that the way of thinking is that we need the study, we need the utility room, we need a decent sized porch area, we need somewhere to store those things. And I think those are all tips and things that I think you should take on board. So my tip of the day is declutter.
You only have to look at Microsoft Teams calls in business to see which rooms people are calling you from, and it's more likely to be either the bedroom or a spare bedroom, or it's going to be from a lounge. And there is no, in other words, there is no spare private space that these houses have, because, as you say, they have opened everything up to make it more communal. But the truth of the matter is, the pandemic is changing the way we need our space. And people, I guess, are thinking, well, I need it now, so I just need to move rather than necessarily to alter. But of course, that could easily be more expensive than actually doing the alterations yourself.
Yes, again, it means there's space in the house. I mean, traditional houses offer the flexibility of extensions and loft conversions and all sorts of things, but the new houses are built to maximum. So even the new house designs now coming in are having to consider all of those things that I've just talked about, because they don't want to. I mean, there was times. I mean, if you look at flats, they used to have a kitchen and a living room. Then they became a lounge kitchen because it was just easy to allow to put it in. When those people that are living there are now thinking, well, actually, I'm going to be working home, so instead of from a 1-bedroom studio, I need 2 because I have the other one as a potential room to work from. And we got a development that's just coming on in Windsor, which is very well designed, and I have to say I had some input into that, just so that you get my little brownie point. But we've got study areas in big bedrooms and so forth, because we saw that, and those are things that are actually are important. And I think sometimes architects and designers actually don't take that on board, because they look at it on an award-winning basis. They want to look at the new design and maximize what they do. What we would say as an agent experience is what's more practical, what are people actually asking for, as opposed to what we're giving them. And if they're asking for something and we give them that, the chances are that the housing market will continue to flourish as it always has done. And people will always want to buy a home, as people always have done. I know that there are first-time buyers coming out of schools and universities all over who are then saying, okay, where do I buy next? Yes, some of them are tough with the deposits and so forth, but most banks of mum and dad are there to help, to try and get their kids onto that ladder, and that will never change. I just can't see that. We're not going to be Europe, where they just rent. This is United Kingdom, and we like to buy.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, Joe, and it always seems to go so quickly. I know we say it every week, but I do want to just bring up some correspondence we had last week. Firstly, Bear with me a second. Here we are. So we just wanted to say thank you to Assad for watching today, and some great tips from Assad came in. But I did have an email in the week, Joe, this is absolutely true, from a gentleman called Mr. Waters, who's been watching every week since we started, would you believe? And it's absolutely true.
Thank you, Mr. Waters.
And you don't know that I haven't told you about this, so this is a complete surprise to you. I know it is, but this is absolutely true. I promise you. So Mr. Waters has written and say he's loved the show every week. He's looking to invest money at some point in the future, and he's enjoying our tips and taking our advice, etc., which is great news. Exactly what the show's about. But he has started with his family to have a bit of a sweepstake each week on the show. And he's enjoying working out with his family when you will say the word broadband. And I know you don't know this is I promise you this is absolutely true. So Mr. Waters is having a bet each week as to when you'll say broadband. And then I did note the time. You haven't said the word broadband today, but you did mention the internet. So I'll take that as broadband. And that was at 32 minutes into the show. So the Waters family, if you are having bets on Joe's mention of broadband, the answer to your question this week was 32 minutes. And in fact, just to prove to you, Joe, Mr. Waters has actually come in and said he thinks it's 34 minutes. Well, I'll split it between you, Wal, and me. 33 minutes is where it was at. So, and thank you for confirming, Wal, because at least he knows I'm telling the truth. So I didn't want to spoil it for you by getting him to put it in by mentioning it at the beginning of the show. So I've done it at the end of the show. So we're delighted to provide a little game for those watching during the week. And if you want to play along next week, who knows when Joe will mention broadband.
I'll be conscious now, just in case I have to change the sweepstakes here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lovely. It's great to see the responses. Wal's just said he'll give us 32. He'll accept 32. So there we are. We have agreement. It was 32. That's lovely. Okay, Joe, thank you so much for all your input, as always, every week. And thank you to everyone for watching. We'll be back again next week at 10 o'clock for another Property Matters. We'll hope you'll join us for that. And of course, get in touch in the week if you'd wish to do so. propertymatterstv@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.